and Inherit the Wind. In addition to lending their name and support to the Theater Research Institute, Lawrence and Lee's generosity has made it possible for us to hold an ongoing series of lectures, events that highlight the rich collections here. These materials document the performing arts for the purposes of scholarship, education, enjoyment, and they support the terrific work being done here by our students, faculty, and researchers from around the world. If you're interested in finding out more about our collections and the great work happening here at the TRI, please feel free to contact us, and you'll find the URL link in the chat. I know you'll enjoy hearing from our esteemed panel today. And so now I would like to turn the program over to my colleague, Maura Fraser, and she will get us started. So over to you, Maura.
Thank you so much, Beth, and hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today for Archives Unveiled. I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm really excited to see the roll call from all over the world of people joining us. I'm delighted to have such a diverse and passionate about burlesque audience to be here today. My name is Maura Fraser. I'm the curator of dance here at the TRI, and here I have the pleasure to preserve and activate distinctive collections on the performing arts, including dance, mime, and movement. And I am thrilled today that we can shine a spotlight on our burlesque collections. I'm going to share a few images of some of our collection materials. I'm very proud to curate these collections. Here at TRI, as Beth mentioned, we have materials on the performing arts. And one of the things that I find exciting about our dance collections is we have everything from traditional performing arts, like the papers of the mime Marcel Marceau or the postmodern choreographer Twyla Tharp. And those are alongside popular entertainments and some really amazing collections on burlesque. From pre-Golden Age to neo-burlesque, our distinctive collections chronicle the intersection of craft and culture and pleasure that is burlesque. So today, I'll be just telling you a little bit about these collections, and then we're going to move on to our keynote from Bella Sin, and then our conversation with Ashley Dunn, Alyssa Stover, Grand Mafun, and Bella. So our burlesque collections are really special. They include, for example, but not exhaustively, and we will put a few links in the chat related to these. The Charles M. McKay collection of exotic dance from burlesque to clubs, the papers of legend Dusty Sage, the fire tassels of Satan's Angel, and more. And I'm very proud of the TRI for leading the way among research institutions in this area. And true to our land-grant mission, we have these amazing materials, but we don't just have them and lock them away. We host classes like this year's smashingly successful History of Burlesque class. You can see on the right, Brian Rocha, who is here monitoring the Q&A today and is our graduate student in the Department of Theater who's working with us in TRI, is teaching with, in that picture, with Satan's Angels collection. And Alyssa will be able to talk more about that class. And we also support researchers, and we are open for research. So that is part of why I wanted to share this with you. We would love for you to come and explore our collections. So please do contact us. Contact us with your questions. If you're far away, if you're coming to Columbus, make an appointment, come in and visit us. So today's webinar, we are focusing on looking beneath the surface of the history of burlesque to understand something about the true history. So after Bella Sin's keynote talk, we're going to move on to our conversation and just get some different perspectives from the research angle, teaching, and the artistry of burlesque. And we will finish this up with a Q&A, a conversation. So hopefully we will get time for your questions. Not hopefully, we will get time for your questions. So now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Bella Sin. I'm going to give just the tiniest bio ever. So we will put the link to Bella's full bio in the chat, and we're just kind of teasing you with a little bio. So Bella Sin is a renowned burlesque performer, community leader, and contributor to the book Rust Belt Burlesque and the TV show American Pickers. Bella is a historian and activist from Cleveland, Ohio, whose work has been instrumental in reshaping the landscape. Bella's efforts to decolonize this art form have opened doors for inclusivity, and their work as a selector extraordinaire for TRI have enriched our collection. So some of the materials you're seeing on this page, Bella found for us, donated to us to our collections. So please join me in welcoming Bella Sin.
Hi, everybody. Yay in Spanish. Thank you so much, to Mara and the whole team here at Ohio State University for putting this together. A special shout out to Alyssa Stover and Ashley Dunn, who are here with us. I am very excited putting all the things, all the stuff. So thank you so much for attending and coming from near and far to go ahead and experience what burlesque is and was and how we're going to talk about it. I'm going to prepare my slides here, as you can see, and probably turn off my camera. So when we talk about decolonial burlesque idealisms, we talk a ton about having the way that we need to have a historical recovery. A lot of people have in mind, as soon as we say decolonize, is essentially to go ahead and take away the all the work that burlesque legends that were white did, and that's not at all what we're doing. We're simply addressing whitewashing in history, re-unearthing, rediscovering, and retelling history of people of colors, immigrants, LGBTQIA, and their involvement within burlesque history. We wanted to go ahead and have people connect with those stories and challenge the idea that burlesque is a white-centered style of art form, since it's not. Commonly taught history will see us to have these legends, which is honestly the basic curriculum, if any, is ever taught in burlesque history, which we have Blaze Starr, Miss Rosalie, we have Tempest Storm, and the Marilyn Monroe of burlesque, Dixie Evans. We have Sally Rand and Jenny Lee. Oftentimes, white legends are focused upon more because of the historical recovery and the historical writings of the time, which were led by patriarchal ideologies in white academia. This is a diverse history curriculum where we're discussing people like Josephine Baker, which was one of the most famous burlesque performers, and I will die on this hill, and I have done it multiple times, in the whole world. And she was from St. Louis. It was a Black woman from St. Louis. She was more than a banana dance. She was a multi-talented entertainer that lived till be 75 with a multitude of sold-out shows. We have Jaden Wong, which was an Asian American burlesque performer, well known for Forbidden City, touring all over the world. And she started actually a firm to help entertainers of Asian descent to get work. We also have the incredible historic Lottie the Body Graves. Detroit has her not only in the Charles H. Roach Museum of African American History, very large over there, because she did not only was influential in the movement of burlesque and the brass rail in Idlewild over in Michigan, but they were an advocate to everything that was Detroit. They were Detroit, essentially. And they had a really big involvement in the Motown movement as well as civil rights. Then we have Big Fanny Annie, who is a plus-size burlesque performer that has paved the way through history for women of size. We have Maringa, which is a trans burlesque performer from Havana, Cuba, who is not only a Latina, but a trans Latina that has changed the world of burlesque in such an amazing way with just living her authentic truth. And of course, Jenna Lee, who without her, we wouldn't have in the institution Burlesque Hall of Fame Museum or anybody interested in archiving our goods. She wanted to go ahead and she acted out of grief and wanted to go ahead and restore the memories she had with her friends in this giant worldview of burlesque. Obviously, when we talk about burlesque, we talk about influencing, and this is but a small amount of influences that come from burlesque. A lot of people will tell you that Aristophanes, the Greek playwright, was the father of burlesque. I beg to differ. I do believe that burlesque was different in a different source, in a different way, known since ancient Sumerian times. Dance became ritual. Ritual became dance. It all started coming forth in a religious or in a belief way of system. And I do believe because we have legends from the Mexica people in Mexico, my homeland, where they talk about a different stripping style ritual for fertility. We have legends in Japan of stripping goddesses that were teasing and stripping to coy somebody out of a cave. We have vaudeville, which was a Parisian style event that attracted so many people throughout the world. And it became one of the biggest things in the United States and in the Americas towards the 1800s. We most specifically have this success of Black theater via William Alexander Brown, who was the owner of the African Grove Theater. In the 1816, this theater company was so successful that other theatrical spaces that were whites only did not want that success or that intellectual. They were doing Othello. They were doing so many different plays. He wrote the Epic of King Shotaway, and it was absolutely fantastic of the amount of people, free Black people, that would sit there and watch the theater and integrate white allies to it. But instead, people focus on talking constantly on about the minstrel show, which barely lasted a few years, and we still see the damage that that caused today, even in some of the practices that still exist within comedy. We also have drag performance art that has been hand to hand with burlesque for absolute years. And this continues to very different traditions from belly dance and to Victorian burlesque into the golden age of burlesque and to modern. All these specific influences have come not from the United States, but from European based countries. And even though a lot of people like to go ahead and use the word American burlesque, America's a continent. The United States burlesque, Mexico, South America, and Canada had involved already big entertainment circuits that actually went through the railroad, just like the circus. A lot of people will go ahead and give flowers to Lydia Thompson for being the start of burlesque in the Americas, but that's further from the truth. If she was alive today, she would be a very famous TikTok star. She was really good at having the drama, the dramaturgy of it all, and being good and outspoken of it. My favorite story of her is that she would stand up for herself, and it didn't matter the controversy. The controversy with her, burlesque was already here in the United States. The controversy with her specifically came from the fact that they were doing the tights performance. Wearing something like nude leggings, showing your ankles, was the craze of the time. Even Cleveland hosted her, the Cleveland Academy of Music, in the early 1900s. We like to ignite thought when we talk about the stop of erasure. It's world burlesque history. It's acknowledging that we have multiple truths in this world burlesque history, and we can dismantle white-centered burlesque shows and white-centered spaces by understanding that they never existed to be that. That is not burlesque. Entertainment history, speaking briefly on how this was a world of entertainment, and it still is today, a theatrical practice that has an involved history throughout the world. And giving back the narrative and the tools to performer of color to start telling their own stories. It's incredibly interesting to talk about our queer ancestors in here, especially Hetty Jo Star, who, through a lot, was the very much publicly known for going through her transition through that time in the United States and being completely open about her transition. She was known to perform with the iconic Pansy Craze parties in the Jewel Box Review that toured all over the US, that started in a Harlem theater in the 1860s into the late 80s. She later designed clothes along her friend Tony Midnight, which literally revolutionized this stage clothing for burlesque performers, and is part of the person that we can blame for the rhinestones and the sequins. Today, of course, we blame a drag queen for all the fantastic things. Queer nightlife was quite popular in Mexico, Paris, and Germany, and many burlesque performers identified as LGBTQIA community members. It was normal part of the biz and something that was kept quiet. Throughout this whole of entertainment, we talk about the idolization of fetishisms, something that still happens today. Cultural appropriation has been nothing new to burlesque. Instead of celebrating the culture and hiring a performer of color, they will go ahead and pick a random performer, give them an act, and they will do it. If you've seen the Sick Phil Follies, you will know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Orientalism or any other ideology of hot and spicy girls down the border, the wild women of the jungle. Unfortunately, those racial stereotypes got so embedded in the world that they still exist today. Even the term exotic dancer was once described for nudity in performance arts, but it became associated with women of color, and that term eventually was phased out towards more friendlier language for academics. And oftentimes we find women in history that have been talked about, like Mata Hari. She was appropriating belly dance culture. She was neither French or German. She was actually Dutch. She was spying for the German army, and she was found guilty by the French and actually killed by firing squad for what they did. A lot of people assume that it was her fashion that started at the modern shape of the pasty, which was not. It was actually Middle Eastern based Egyptian dancers. They had different jewelry and different access to different materials to cover themselves at the time. We also see people, they were well known for enacting and wearing indigenous sacred war bonnets like Lily Sincere. Everything was so fetishized, and it still is today. The perception of cultural exploitation and modern entertainment doesn't stop. From Polynesian culture with Tiki, from Latino culture with really anything that's in vogue right now. I love Bad Bunny, but let's calm down. And then we also have a ton of people that are willing to go ahead and do their dancers, their voices, forced outside because they are doing this based on privilege. Um, White dancers are doing this based on privilege because they say it's just a song, it's not a big deal. So, of course, we take space to recognize that the influence of racial prejudice in queer erasure is in historical research. We question the sources by using critical thinking. We have a redirective of the narrative, and we share our findings and resources instead of paywalling them, because it's important for us to continue to empower, educate, and give the tools to performer of color to go ahead and have the way to find themselves in history. Historical erasure is also very much based on collections. Specifically, the collectors that I have rescued, a lot of the things that I have given to Ohio State from are 55 to 90-year-old men, cis white gendered men. They are both a positive thing for burlesque and a negative. Unfortunately, this is all based on a notch in the belt that they never were able to achieve, or a fantasy. Some of them really did think that they were in relationships with these women. And I've gone into houses that have been full of pictures of our legends, even our living legends, with written letters to them. This whole like proprietary, like I own this, I own her kind of thing came from all this collecting, but they did purchase all these things and kept them in great condition for people like us to go ahead and retrieve and put into source like Ohio State or Burlesque Hall of Fame to be enjoyed by people all over the world. Collections sometimes, collectors sometimes, despite their flaws, really do help us curate a large amount of information for how many dancers were out there and what people lived towards. For example, if it wasn't for the collections in Ohio State and Burlesque Hall of Fame, I wouldn't have learned about Princess Lahoma, which was one of the most popular indigenous burlesque performers from the Chickasaw Nation. And I wouldn't have learned about Stormy DeLandre if I didn't have queer elders that archived all our stories. The best part about my involvement with the ICA Beehive Case Western Reserve Museum here in Cleveland, Vegas, and Ohio State is that I'm able to go ahead and suffice future generations into rediscovering history and seeing it in a different point of view. Self-reflection on collecting is incredibly important. We have to know that, are we the problem? Are we the ones that are keeping something that needs to be properly archived? Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not, sometimes we're helping, but we really have to ask that question to ourselves. Accessing the education for proper preservation is important. I've been really lucky with people like Mara, Nina Cooch, and a lot of people like Darby Fox, the Burlesque Hall of Fame, and a multitude of my friends that are part of academia to teach me the skills to be able to save and work with collections and help other people find the things they're looking for. We can all be part of the issue. By not learning where our ancestors came from and where the background of this art form came from, we're contributing to erasure. The average burlesque performer, once beginning, does not receive an average education, is always focused in the dance form. 2 to 3 years within their career, they start learning about burlesque history based on necessity because they have entered the whole of the industry. And also it's about asking ourselves, what does preservation mean to you? Because here we do talk about historical erasure, and we do talk about why there is many more books written about Gypsy Rosalie than there are about Josephine Baker. That's easy. This is a historical comparison. You can see they were active around the same years, and one was shown more success than others. I have to say that Josephine Baker not only is buried in the Parthenon in France, but is one of the most beloved French artists of the time in the Art Nouveau art, like jazz movement was very much aided by her to take the world stage. But yet she had to come back to her native her native St. Louis, and enter the back door of a venue because it was not yet integrated and performed for all white audiences. Those are things that we need to talk about because their stories are specific. Lottie the Body and her work in Detroit, Dongolele, which just recently passed away in Mexico DF, was actually born in the United States to Mexican migrant parents and decided to go back to Mexico. And she didn't want to go ahead and attain herself to white beauty standards in Hollywood, so she went to work in Mexico to go ahead and be true to herself. We had the work of Jaden Wan, of Su Muing Ki. A lot of people don't know that after the Chinese Exclusion Act, migration took hold and took a lot of Asian immigrants to Mexico. Su Muing Ki was Chinese, and her sister owned the Blanquita Theater in Mexico DF. And then we have people that transcend just the idea of burlesque, and they perform. Ajita Wilson performed The Crazy Horse in Paris, and they were in sexploitation films, but were also a burlesque performer. And you don't hear their stories often. You don't hear about their success. You hear about the things that happened to them, or the tragedies, or the essentially the bad things that happened to them. You don't hear about the incredible and wild success internationally that all of them had, and how burlesque was everywhere, not just in the US. The legacy of Jenny Lee and Dixie Evans has been something that has inspired me a lot since Jenny Lee unionized the burlesque performers to fight for fair labor conditions and safety, creating the Exotic Dancers League of North America, also known as the EDL, where she not only served as president, later as Preservation Society Club member, and there was essentially a club for all retired dancers. They had bowling leagues, they had baseball teams, they had a ton. And her dream was to create a retirement community for her sisters to go ahead and have a space to go to. And that's her bar, Sassy Lassie. That's the name that now people get for the nomination of the Sassy Lassie Award for Burlesque Hall of Fame. Dixie Evans is specifically to credit for creating Miss Exotic World, the Queen of Burlesque or Mixed Exotic World that we know today. The museum was in a little farm in the middle of nowhere in the desert. And she was like, what am I going to do? Jenny had passed away from cancer. The museum was struggling. This place was a room upon room upon room. And it was in the middle of nowhere. So what'd she say? Hey, you know what? I'm going to throw a pageant. And I'm just going to say, oh, invited to attend Tempest Storm, Blaze Star, blah, blah, blah. It worked. There was more photographers and reporters in the audience, but there was a lot of people in the 90s that remembered burlesque, including girls that knew what burlesque was. We didn't have social media like we do today, so this was a lot of word of mouth in between the areas. And that's how we received our first Burlesque Hall of Fame queen. This still, to this day, it started as a fundraiser for Burlesque Hall of Fame. It is still an ongoing fundraiser to Burlesque Hall of Fame Museum, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that exists in Las Vegas, Nevada, that I always tell people, feel free, as well as feel free to contact Ohio State and Burlesque Hall of Fame. The archivists there worked so hard, Darby and Buttercup, to go ahead and continue to preserve our history. And there has been so much communication and unity between Ohio State and Burlesque Hall of Fame, Danielle Picker from American Pickers, to make sure that all this history is saved. We're all in it together. It really gives us the fiber of neo-burlesque, seeing all the icons and the legends of our living history coming back now, being in 30 plus years of its inception of what the new burlesque is. All of them representing what burlesque was back in the day. Today, a beautiful tapestry of people that not only engage in fantastic entertainment, but in community with each other. And this continues to drive the neo-burlesque community forward to create more work and more, I like to say endurance, because this is a marathon, not a race, to continue to archive, save, and have the history of burlesque present today. So I hope that was not super long. That was my keynote. And if anything that can be taken away from this, please remember that institutions like Ohio State University, Burlesque Hall of Fame are here to help you discover where the puzzle piece is for you in this wonderful tapestry.
Thank you so much, Bella. Can we just all take a moment to share some heartfelt appreciation in the chat? I can't seem to react, but if you're able to share reactions, that was so enlightening. I've learned so much, and I feel so excited. There's clearly so much history in every slide, that there's a feeling of like, we just want you to sit with us and tell us these stories, identify these images, and clearly there's more discussion that needs to happen in this area. So thank you, Bella. That talk really set the stage for the discussion that we want to have today, and hopefully discussions that are ongoing. So today we have Bella plus 3 additional panelists. We're going to move into the discussion section. So I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. A few short introductions to our panelists. And again, we will put more links to their bios and contact info or socials in the chat if you want to learn more about these amazing people. So first of all, Ashley Dunn is a PhD candidate in the Department of Theater here at Ohio State, who researches Black female sexuality and the politics of pleasure, Black burlesque performers, and Black female playwrights and theater history. Alyssa Stover is also a PhD candidate here at Ohio State in the Department of Dance with a graduate minor in Women's and Gender and Sexuality Studies. And Alyssa Stover's research is on burlesque in New Orleans, focused on gender, race, class, and sexuality. Grand Mafun is a burlesquer and a performance artist. a classy lady in the corner, and what I'm calling a Technicolor dream, who is currently in Nashville. So panelists, come on out, please, and join us. I'm so excited for this conversation. Hi, everybody. All right, so I think we can let this be as much of a conversation as it wants to be. This is kind of the type of group of people that when you get together, the conversation is just going to be interesting, but I have questions to start us off. So first of all, Grand Mafun, hello.
Hi.
Can you describe your artistic vision and how you have approached your act? And this could be now, this could be historically, you've gone through different performance practices, but what kinds of stories are you telling? What themes do you touch on, if you're not telling stories? And how does your work contribute to reinterpreting or innovating within the art form of burlesque, of performance art, of dance? Tell us more.
So I actually approached burlesque because with what Bellison was talking about, I actively had seen erasure happening. And so I was actually in New York at the time. This was back in like 2008, 2007 era. And I started to get interested into burlesque because I had a friend who was like go-go dancing in the circuit and like the Lower East Side, all of that stuff. And then I noticed that there was a lot of cultural appropriation, but not enough brown and Black performers. So I took it upon myself as somebody who's, I immigrated here when I was really young. I was mistaken for so many different ethnicities and backgrounds, however people felt that they wanted to approach me. And I really wanted to be subversive with my work. When I was seeing people using, just taking things about cultures that they're not aware of and not having the importance of it and actively erasing people, it really struck a nerve to me because I was like, well, that is not the people are cherry picking these things that they like about cultures. I also was somebody who liked to turn things on their head and kind of have this narrative and question, like, why do they look at us that way? What's the source? Where's that coming from? And so that's really what Grand Mafun became. It was she's basically it's like imagine AI now and how you feed AI information and they come out with like they sort of got it but the hands are wrong, you know what I mean? That's how I feel like when I was learning about American history and my place in American history and as a performer or how I would have been perceived as a performer, I would literally look like a tiki drink from like the Rainforest Cafe. And then so I turned that, and instead of it being like I became offended by it, I really wanted to hold a mirror up against these performers, like, well, why are you choosing these things? And that's exactly how people are going to see me. So everybody thinks I'm Hawaiian, I'm Native American, I'm all of these kinds of things. So that's really where I started. And I really wanted to set the record straight, but also poke fun.
I love that. And the humor is such a thread, it seems like. So I would love to ask kind of a parallel question to both Ashley and Alyssa, but then just have you answer. I'll call on you to answer so that you can get some time to explain, because knowing that you're researchers, so can you introduce us to how you have been studying burlesque, how you've been approaching it, and how does your work contribute to reinterpreting the legacy? So, and then also, like, how did you come to be working with burlesque? Um, we'll just start there. We'll start there. So, Ashley, can you tell us about that?
So unlike some of the panelists, I am not a burlesque performer. I'm not a dancer. How I came to burlesque actually was like this personal inquiry that I had when I started my program. I was approaching 30 years old. And then the question that came up for me was, why was it so hard for me to like feel confident and express my sensuality and my eroticism? I think I'm a very sensual person, but I had a lot of shame about that. And I think it stems from growing up in a Black Christian household. And so I wanted to explore that. So I read some Black feminist scholars to understand like the history of Black women and sexuality in this country, and a way to explore that and bring it back to theater, because that was always what my professors would say, Ashley, come on, bring it back to theater, was burlesque. And I will be honest, I didn't know much about burlesque at all. So I definitely had a learning curve, but I decided to focus on Black women or Black burlesque dancers in order to explore Black women and sexuality. So that's how I got involved with this research.
I love that. Thank you. And I think that it would take, that sounds like it took a lot of bravery to say like, okay, I don't know about this form yet, but I'm gonna dig in and study. And so what has that topic led you into as far as like, so like the focus of your research or who you've encountered? Have there been like specific burlesque performers that you dug into more?
Yeah, so when I first started my exploration, the TRI was definitely really helpful to me, and just providing this background and information in this history. I came across Leslie Zemeskis, her Behind the Burlesque book, and that was like pulling in all these interviews and oral narratives from burlesque dancers. Um, this book had about like 40 chapters, and way back in the back of the book was a chapter that was titled Exotic Others. And this chapter was to basically talk about BIPOC performers in one little small chapter. And I came across a picture of Jean Idell, and immediately, like, this was someone that I wanted to learn more about. This was a Black burlesque performer dancing in the 1940s and 50s, and her claim to fame was that she was one of the first Black performers to break the color barrier at that time. So she danced at Minsky's Rialto Review or Theater, which was the Minsky brothers were prominent burlesque performers in their time. So having a Black woman perform at one of these venues was really major. And that's all that Leslie had in that book. And that's all that I could find as far as Jean Idell. And I'm like, this is an amazing woman that I want to learn more about. And I know that there are other, Black burlesque performers that were doing great things and have contributed a lot to burlesque, and their stories needed to be highlighted. So I would say Jean Idell was a dancer that I wanted to explore more. And I honestly, initially, my dissertation, I wanted to not exclusively focus on Jean Idell, but definitely include her or focus on her for my dissertation. And so maybe that's a project in the future, but yeah.
Yeah, Minda May comments, that book needs to add a few more chapters. And it sounds like between you, Bella, the people in this room, maybe we have what it takes to add those chapters. And I hope that you keep following this research, Ashley, because it's important.
Yes.
Yeah. So Alyssa, how did you come to be doing research on burlesque? Can you tell us about how you're approaching the art form and what your research has led to?
Yes, absolutely. So I first encountered burlesque. I like to joke that it was right out of undergrad, and I was a dance major in undergrad, and I was going through like a breakup with ballet and modern dance because I was tired and burned out. It's like I want to take dance classes, but I don't want them to involve point shoes anymore. So coincidentally, I was living about a 10-minute walk away from the New Orleans School of Burlesque at the time. So I started taking burlesque classes with Bella Blue, who is a really well-known performer, producer in the New Orleans burlesque scene. So this was back in like 2010-ish, around then. So it's been a hot minute. And I just completely fell in love with burlesque as an art form because I felt like I was really at home in my body, which was very different from the classical dance forms that I was trained in. So I started I kept taking classes, I was performing, and then I decided I hadn't had enough school in my life, so I went back and I did my master's degree, and I wrote my master's thesis on cultural appropriations and tropes of the exotic other in neo-burlesque. And now I'm here doing this PhD at OSU. My dissertation is focusing on New Orleans burlesque, specifically neo-burlesque, which is contemporary burlesque performers. And that sort of came from a frustration of encountering the existing literature. A lot of current written literature on burlesque is very focused on like New York and Chicago, whatnot, with, of course, the exception of Rust Belt Burlesque, fantastic book. Yeah. And so I got frustrated because my experience with burlesque was, I've lived in New Orleans since 2006. It's still my home. I'm here in Columbus right now, but I will be moving back to New Orleans any minute. And my husband's still there, so that's still our base. And I just felt there are all these incredible performers in New Orleans, also in, you know, the American South, and the literature in academia has not caught up yet to that particular region. So I really wanted to bring that in my dissertation project. So I have been writing this dissertation and am hoping to finish it before the end of 2025, we hope. So, and one of my main goals with this particular project on New Orleans burlesque is to focus on performers of color, queer performers, and exploring how they are sort of navigating the very unique space of New Orleans performance, because New Orleans as a city, like performing in New Orleans is not the same as performing in New York or Chicago or Cleveland. So trying to bring a regional focus to some burlesque scholarship as well and add to what's already there. It's kind of my project right now.
Exciting, really exciting. Okay, so I have so many questions. Which way to go? So, okay, so Bella, there were so many ideas in your keynote, and we could talk all day, but you are a burlesque performer, you have a company, right? Can you tell us a little bit about how you approach the art form, how you even got into it, kind of your aesthetics of burlesque and of costumes, and yeah, what do you want to tell us about your performance practice?
I'm not from a dancer background. I actually moved to the United States in the 2000s. And I moved from Mexico to Denver, Colorado, and I was attending public school, which was a very diverse inner city school, very underfunded. And I I think I was trying to find who I was, as now I was when I moved here, I was just Mexican, and then when I was here, there was all these other in like things on top of me of definition, like, oh, since you're light skinned enough, you can go ahead and pretend you're white and you can do all this. And I was like, I don't want to do that. There was a lot of things that were in development in my mind in my teens, and one of those things through this whole like Americanization, quote unquote, was stitching class and doing something bad. And of course, I went to the library. Um, Ta-da! Fallen Youth. And that's where I found a burlesque book. It was called the Pictorial History of Burlesque. And when I opened that book, it was just like it zeroed in, and I was like, oh, this is it. Through time, I lied about my age because I was like 16, 17 at the time when I was starting to take classes. And, all the stuff, Whirlwind took me somehow to Ohio and Cleveland. And I was like, you know what? As a good Sagittarian, I never think of my decisions, and I just started doing burlesque in Denver, and then came here, had my daughter. Now I was single mother, and I was like, I'm just gonna do it. I have to do it for her. I have to do something. The definition of my art form was very white-centered for a while because that's what they wanted you to think burlesque was. You had to be old school, you had to be all these other things that you were not, and it was like so frustrating to me to even get forward in my art form because they said like if you do a song in Spanish, da, 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 and all that immigrant shame that comes with it, because I used to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm Mexican. And thank God for Foxy Tan from Minneapolis, Minnesota, because she set me straight one day in New York, ironically in the newest restaurant that the Brass Rail used to be in. Um, and she said, stop being ashamed of who you are, just become who you are. And that kind of like turned my dial to, I was like, wait, yeah, why am I being so apologetic about who I am when I can just be me? So that it became, I was like, yes, I am Mexican and this is my background. So based on my political ideology, which is pro-immigrant, and pro-Mexican, all that, I started working with my cultural make with my songs. I started rediving and rediscovering through history. I just wanted to find me through time, and that's why I think I was pushed so much. Books were my best friend. I was a lonely kid, and I was just like, books, and I found myself in so many places, but there was small parts of it. And it wasn't until I attended my first Burlesque Hall of Fame that I met a Latin legend, Marinka, that really cemented that we have belonged and been here, and that really cemented into my performance of uh, challenging your perspective of migrants, of immigrants, of Mexicans, of Mexican women, plus size women, queer people, non-binary folks, and challenging it in the stage. You may not hear me speak, but you'll hear my people and you'll see my culture. And that's kind of where I went. And it wouldn't have been possible either without me seeing my first representation of people of color, which was Grand Mafun in the New York Burlesque Festival in 2010, 2011, and seeing the Brown Girls Burlesque. Because at that point, there was some performers of color around, but it was almost like a minstrel of Mexican culture that they were doing. And I was like, that's not, I'm like, hello. It was almost like you had to meet, there was Chicano and born Mexicans, we have issues, but we fix them. But there was almost like this minstrel of the ideology is like white ideology of Mexico that this performer had. And it wasn't until I really truly saw Brown Girls Burlesque that I was just like, I remember it so well because they literally like they announced them and it was like the room went quiet and like nothing else mattered to me. And like my favorite part that I'm gonna ruin in everybody's numbers, they opened their corsets and they had each flag of a colonized nation on it. They were not wearing shoes and they looked different. It was culture aware. And I was aware of that culture aware, and I was like, and that was the moment that really defined like I'm not alone and I can continue going. So I started looking for, my people. And that's kind of how it just went into practice. Just be unapologetically you and take your space as a person of color in burlesque.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's fascinating. I love that. I love drawing the thread back to Brown Girls Burlesque too, because that was one of my follow-up questions for Grand Mafun. And Grand Mafun, I also wanted to ask, you went through New Orleans for a time as well, right?
Yeah, I did. So I moved around a lot. And then so after I think 2012, 2013, I moved to New Orleans and I was there from like, was it? No, I went to New Orleans the first time in 2013 and moved there around 2015. And then I moved to Nashville like 3 years ago. So
Okay.
I've been there for like a good chunk of time, especially during that time of there wasn't actually a lot of BIPOC performers in New Orleans. And I was actually one of the only Asian big performers in the city.
Wow.
Yeah.
Such an experience.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. So this is for a question for everyone who thinks of yourself as a teacher or who is instructing, but I know that Bella and Ashley formally teach in different ways. That Bella, you are passing on the lineage and the story. And I mean, did I say Ashley? I meant Alyssa. Alyssa's teaching a course right now. But anybody can answer this that you want to. So I guess what I want to ask is, why is it important to pass on the legacy of burlesque? I think we got some of this from the keynote, but I also want to know, how do you go about passing on this legacy of the art form? How specifically are you teaching? What are you teaching about? Who is it for? All of that. Whoever wants to go for it.
Well, for me, I just wanted to mention my formative years in burlesque really was rooted in Brown Girls Burlesque. They were definitely a group of women, all made up of different diversities. And we recognized that there was a lack of diversity in the scene. And a lot of the acts we were doing was socio-political acts. And we were definitely ahead of the curve. And like what Bellison was saying, we are actually decolonizing in real time with that performance that we did for New York Burlesque Festival and BHOF. Our dresses were made actually like with African and Indonesian batik textiles. The reveal was really just us, like when we took off our shoes and we took off all of this colonization that was happening. It spoke with that music, and it was to Aiko Aiko, right? And so there was a lot of layers to this number. And then from then on, when I jumped off and did a lot of solo stuff, I literally just wanted to do a blueprint of just like that we existed and that we're still going to continue to exist, and that there are times where there will be spaces and gaps where there will be erasure, but that does not mean that we were not there, because I found BIPOC performers of the past. And I also felt like I'm probably going to end up like that burlesque dancer that you find that photo in the bottom of like a dusty antique shop, like, you know, like in the bin. Like that's kind of my goal. I want to be that for that performer that someone's like, who is this? You know, and that's kind of what Grand Mafun represents. I wanted her to represent the past, present, and future, and kind of just have this harbinger of almost like a portal between timelines. So it's crazy that I'm like in so many different cities. I've made myself, like I've immortalized myself where no one's going to do it for you, is all I'm going to say. So if you want to be seen and if you want to be represented, you're going to have to do it yourself, and you're going to have to make, you can't wait for other people to do it. So I've put myself in publications and books and TV shows. I've done everything that I wanted, so that I needed for people to know, even in the future, that there was a Filipina burlesque performer named Grandmother the Fun. And that's kind of what I've been working towards anyways. I wanted to leave a legacy of my own, not off of the backs of like allocates or titles or whatever, that I existed. And that's what I've been doing.
I would
Thank you.
like to go next. Education wise, it was pretty much put to me by my mom and my family that being in the United States is like a second opportunity, right? And I was just like, okay, so I have this one chance to do something. And the whole thing about living a legacy and being the daughter of immigrants and being the first coming here with them, there's a lot of pressure on the way that one was to achieve and what to do. And I remember my grandmother telling me that the stories of our ancestors are always going to be with us just by remembering our family. And I'm a really big Day of the Dead celebrator over here. So like I can tell you everybody from my altar related or not, where they come from, where they were born, all that stuff. So it was already embedded into me to go ahead and start talking about the past, because that's how we know how to handle the present and the future. A lot of people don't understand why I went to burlesque history versus dance. Yes, I teach dance, but how are you going to understand the dance curriculum if you don't know the history of the women who invented it, who trademarked it, of the influence that it came with it, and of the women of color that and the queer people that trailblazed this idea. So to me, it was very important to start teaching in a manner of how can I put this without sounding like a jerk? I wanted to go ahead and challenge every single white school or white burlesque show. I wanted to challenge, ironically, what really pushed the decolonizing burlesque education was Leslie Zemeckis in the film, sorry, Leslie, but love you, Leslie. Leslie Zemeckis in Behind the Burlesque, because there was a researcher in there. And I remember getting really mad at this. And it's like, oh, there was these performers of colors, like these other circuits, but they were never as popular as the American Burlesque Queen. I was like, what the fuck is an American Burlesque Queen? You see, I got mad. But it's it's that thing that I wanted to be like, no, I want everybody to find themselves in history. I want everybody to not feel out of center or like they don't belong, because I spent so much time believing that I wasn't worthy. And regardless of whatever's out there, like there was always a place that I knew, again, libraries. There was libraries and museums. There's always a place that I knew that I was going to find the truth. And at that, I started to learn how that truth was based on perception. So a lot of historical archival out there is specifically focused on white cisgendered women, because a lot of people exoticize their idea of the way that they showcase themselves, based on patriarchal BS. And I think a lot of people still view burlesque in a patriarchal art way, because they want to present all skinny white shows. And I always tell people that through history, my point of education is that, one, I don't want anybody else to be forgotten. I want to get the girls out that are not in the light. And I want to make sure that what transcends me as my legacy is the fact that I worked to a point that everybody can go ahead and be like, oh, hey, I heard that there was this historian that was talking about the colonial burlesque history. Let's go ahead and look that up and see where we can go from it. I want people to question resources, sources, and background, and why people were not in the room. And even to this day, I tell people, it's like, why do you think we're not in rooms? Sometimes our ancestors take us out of it, but sometimes we're not put in there on purpose. And I want people to that at least learn anything from me to have the experience of being able to learn, especially without a ton of financial investment, because paywalling a lot of I had to do so much with paywall research. If it wasn't for this collection, I wouldn't have the ability to have read handwritten letters from Sally Rand when she was in the Philippines, fan dancing with giant palm tree palms. And I remember that moment. I think I cried. I have it tattooed in my arm, but like I think I cried, and like I was like, "Oh, don't get it on the stuff." But it's those small moments of connection to our ancestors that I really want other people to connect with, because there were so many women, so many trans women, so many non-binary people, so many queer people, so many people from different backgrounds, that I want people to see them, because then maybe this ideology of patriarchal burlesque idealisms will stop. Like even Dita Von Teese has done her fair share of pioneering, but I want people to think of, not saying that I don't want them to think about a white legend specifically, but I want to be like, hey, did you know that Satan's Angels does exist? But did you know she stole her act from White Fury? And did you know that Shauna the Black Venus actually was trolling tassels, and her and Satan got into a conversation about it? Like, I have all that tea, but I think is I think it's my passion project too. And I know that giving this off to Alyssa, I know that they feel the same after we had a really good kiki couple times.
Yeah. It's I love thinking about like ways to go about teaching this history and these stories, because also they're just so interesting. There's just so much tea to be had in this. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the class that I'm currently teaching this semester. So I'm teaching in the dance department, a course in it's under the in the dance major sort of HTL, which is history, theory, literature courses, special topics. So it's the dance studies in burlesque class. So it's for dance majors and minors. It's all undergrads. I have from sophomores to seniors. And so we have been doing a lot of reading and a lot of video watching, and we spent 2 weeks in special collections with Mara in the middle of the semester. So one of the things that I really wanted to do with this course is thinking about how we go about teaching these histories, who gets to be talked about in the syllabi creation, like that whole process of sort of curating this course. And also keeping in mind that they're undergrads, so you can't assign them a book a week to read. And so it's been really exciting. I have 17 students enrolled in the class, and we have I'll give a quick outline. The first half of the semester was really focused on history of burlesque in the United States, and all the way up to about the 1960s, 70s, at which point we went to special collections and we worked on a project there with Mara and Brian, which was so much fun and really exciting. And it was really invigorating to see students get into an archive and get excited about it. So I think sometimes there's, especially with undergrads, if they haven't encountered archives before, there's an idea of like, it's old dusty letters and, maybe it's boring, but like, first of all, those old dusty letters contain really interesting things. But also like the fact that our archives have costume items and, Satan's Angels tassels and these incredible, incredible images of all of these performers. The students got really excited about it. And I think it was a really successful endeavor. So I was really thrilled with that and really appreciate Mara and Brian for all of their efforts on that as well. Since we have returned to back to our classroom after our special collections field trip, we have been talking about neo-burlesque and looking at sort of neo-burlesque topically throughout. And when I was creating this syllabus, I was really thinking about like, I didn't want to do like, we're gonna have like this history, and then we're gonna have a week where we talk about like Black burlesque, and then we have a week where we talk about queer burlesque, because as Bella has like been so wonderfully educational, and like Black burlesque history is burlesque history. Like we don't need to pull that apart quite so hard. So we've been talking about race the entire semester. We've been talking about gender the entire semester. We talk about class. We talk about those racial stereotypes and archetypes and where they came from and how we still see them, especially now that we're in the neo-burlesque part of the course, like how those things that we studied at the beginning of class are still matriculating their way into performance now. We talked about today we had a great conversation about nerdlesque and who's performing various nerdlesque, and that was a fun one to show videos for. Very, very fun. So I've it's been really exciting. Also, thank you to Ashley for coming to class, and she gave a fantastic lecture on Black foremothers of burlesque, and it was beautiful and wonderful. So I'm happy to answer more questions about that class, but it's been a really exciting endeavor. And it was also, I really wanted to teach the class because, dance majors, they have to take dance history classes as part of their major. And, why not burlesque history in there? Like they learn about history of jazz and ballet and modern and musical theater. Like burlesque should be in there because it is part of dance history. So, it's been really great. And also like, I think it's important to get students thinking about like what they think they know about a topic. So the first day of class, one of the first things I asked them was, what do you think burlesque is? Because only one of them out of 17 had ever been to a burlesque show. And yeah, I had that same expression, Bella. Same. But then I remembered I hadn't been to a burlesque show in college either. So we learn, we grow. But most of the answers were the Moulin Rouge Broadway choreography or the Christina Aguilera movie from like 2011. Like, all right, this is where we're at. So we will grow from here and we will learn. And it's been going really, I'm really excited to see what final projects they do. I know some of them have gone back to the special collections for more work on their final projects. So yeah, and happy to answer more questions about that if there are some, but
Yeah,
it's been exciting.
It's been so exciting. It was really fun to see students laughing, smiling, shocked faces in the collections, and then to see them come back kind of avidly because sometimes you can tell when students are just fulfilling an assignment. So they were coming back with questions. Really quick, Ashley, just for resources for our audience, I know you mentioned Jean Idell. Who are some of the other Black foremothers of burlesque that people can kind of chase down, pursue understanding, or at least like look for your dissertation to learn about?
Yeah. So in my dissertation, I take a look at Creole Burlesque Co., which was an all-Black burlesque troupe that was formed in the 1890s. And some major figures too. One person that I do talk a little bit about is Florence Hines, who was a drag or a male impersonator. And so she was a prominent Black male impersonator for her time. Some other major figures that I focus on is Josephine Baker as Bella Sin. I do think that, and I have heard people put her in conversation as a burlesque dancer, but I think when you look at her catalog overall, her performance, I don't think people would classify her as a burlesque performer, but I do think that she should be included because the burlesque dancers that I interviewed for my project, quite a few of them placed her as a foremother. And still to this day, there are several Black burlesque performers who pay tribute to her. And then Ada Overton Walker, which I think that, again, this is not a figure that I will sort of classify all of her performance as burlesque. But she was performing in the early 1900s and was one of the first Black female performers to dance the Dance of Salome or the Dance of Seven Bells, which was an early striptease act that was all the rage in that time. And so when striptease became really popular in burlesque in the 1920s and onwards, there were a lot of burlesque, mainstream burlesque performers who were adopting this Dance of the Seven Bells. And so, Ada Overton Walker, like I said, was one of the first Black female performers to dance this striptease act. So that's only a few, but those are just some that I focused on in my dissertation.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that gives people like streams they can go down. Bella, yeah.
The interesting part on how that all got connected to the Dance of the Seven Bells on that, the World's Fairs.
Yeah.
So that's how I learned Little Egypt's little name. So I love that you said the Creole Burlesque because they're like, I have stuff for you to have just as a gift now. Because I have found so much of them, but it's like so wonderful when you see burlesque and belly dance intertwine. It's like, it's so exciting that you said that. I love you.
Love
Can I say one more thing, Mara? And it's Alyssa, when you were talking about like what is burlesque? And I think that was a question that's been a question that continuously pops up for me throughout like writing this dissertation. And I will say that by focusing on Black burlesque dancers for my project, I think that it has like expanded my understanding of what it is and what burlesque can do. I think I was sort of reducing it to, oh, it's striptease or it's about parody. But no, I think that these are like tools, things that a performer can utilize to elicit something. But I think burlesque is about space. It's about curating a space. It's about bringing together people who are cast down and cast out in society for them to form community, And so, yeah, I think, like I said, by focusing on Black burlesque dancers, it really has helped me to expand sort of my thinking about it.
I also wanted to just hop in real quick about touching base on that too, Ashley. Defining burlesque, especially as somebody who has come into it in this space, like back in like 2008, and when we were all coming together, Black and Brown performers, the thing about what makes burlesque so amazing is how accessible it is because it's such a medium that you have absolute control over the narrative. You don't have to subscribe to what you think burlesque is. Because it's theater and because you have agency, you can really explore the deepest depths of it. You could do however you want to do. You could perform however you want. You have so much agency, from curating your looks to music to the stories that you want to tell, that I feel like even if you are teaching it or studying it, or even just getting into it, that there's no right or wrong way to get into burlesque. It's just giving yourself the grace and the time to be like, this is something that I would like to explore, and allowing yourself to be like, I can go really deep with it, or not. You could just be about rhinestones too, but it's something that has, I think it really reflects and gives you a space to hold a mirror to yourself for any sort of baggage you may have, or issues, or really start to do like shadow work in a way. And that's something that I always talk about with people when they want to do burlesque. I'm always just like, well, how do you define it for yourself? And then you go from there. So
This is excellent. I have done that thing where we have enjoyed each other enough and so much that there's not quite time for the Q&A part. Um, I feel that you have just answered that. We do have one question that was in the Q&A about, if you don't have good teaching on burlesque in your area as a producer, what can you do? Where can you start? I feel like you just answered that in several ways, all of you. It's about connection, it's about agency, it's about embracing your body, who you are, your heritage, your story, and it's different for different people, right? So if you have more to add to that, and also this is the moment for if you've got something to plug, because people are going to want to find you later. So if you have stuff going on, shows, podcasts, please say it now. So Bella, go for it, and we'll just say our last goodbyes. Just go around.
So to answer that question very honestly, do not center yourself in it. Understand that this is a community-based industry, and you have to be able to be okay with being wrong, and being okay with learning and relearning and challenging so many things having to do with whiteness, or unlearning whiteness, or unlearning racism, or your own peripherals of a perception is going to challenge your thinking. Burlesque history will challenge your thinking. This is race theory. This is critical race theory. This is a lot of those things that, a lot of people are like, oh my God, diversity, equity, inclusion. Y'all, like, this will make you change your mind. It really made me grow as a person, inside, mind, and out. So when you're doing all this good education out there, there's so many online resources. Like, I have a bunch of tools, OSU has a bunch of tools. There is so many out there right now. Mason Burlesque Academy in Australia is doing a lot of dance. I focus a ton in burlesque history. Then we have BurlyCon, Burlesque Hall of Fame, during the weekend, or they have classes as well. And I love reading dissertations, and there are so many dissertations to read. I look forward to reading Ashley's and Alyssa's dissertation. But there's so much research. Don't center yourself in it, and just accept it for what it is, and just keep going and give it, and being open about it. And if you have challenges um, about it, reach out, ask questions. It's okay. Nobody's going to make you feel like you're dumb. This group right here has not only cemented my career, but encouraged it and nurtured it and pushed it forward. Even when I asked questions, they were like, yeah, let's talk about it. And I was like, what? I usually get told no. So you can find me on Bellicent CLE. I'm on Bellicent CLE on all social media. Cle as in Silly, Bellicent CLE as in Cleveland. I just started a new podcast called The History of the Shimmy. It's about burlesque history, and we actually just had a dramageddon that happened last week, and I had to again, and I had to talk about defining burlesque and all its influences and what it believes in. So we're going to be diving into legends. We're going to talk about these women individually, because Instagram only lets me have a minute 30, and I for sure need 45 to even talk about scratching the surface with a lot of the legends. And it's, in my perception, BIPOC POC focus, but I'm going to be talking a lot about very amazing people that I also will share personal stories on because I had the pleasure of meeting a lot of these women. If you want to come to a show, clevelandburlesque.com, Ohio Burlesque Festival. Ohio Burlesque Festival is August 7th through 10th at the Beachland Ballroom in Cleveland, and we have a monthly show at the Beachland Ballroom, Cleveland Burlesque LLC, now 21 years old. uh, that you guys can come and see. And if you have any burlesque history, anyone you say you find something, you get a hold of Mara and you donate it to Ohio State University. That also includes mailing pictures of yourself, posters, postcards of your local burlesque community, the neo burlesque community. I've been donating a ton of that stuff. Send it to Mara. You have posters, send it to Mara. Don't, and also you can support their work by talking about it and telling people about it. It's not just Ohio Burlesque, sorry, it's not just Ohio State that does our archival, also Burlesque Hall of Fame does archival, but these two organizations work hand to hand on very many occasions and have helped each other thrive so many times. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I appreciate you so much. Hugs in Spanish. And yeah, hit me up if you have questions.
That's fantastic. I have nothing to add. Alyssa is answering a question in the chat that might be interesting to others, but is there anyone else that wants to plug anything or final thoughts before we say goodbye? I think we're good. All right. Well,
before we leave, since they're not plugging themselves and they're really bad at it, you can go ahead and find Alyssa Stover on Instagram. They also have a link on the page in the bottom in the comments, so you can follow their dissertation and what they're doing, as well as Miss Alicia Dunn. Ashley Dunn has a dissertation coming. So, okay, it's Grand Mafun. On Instagram, you will have to request her, Lisa.stover87, as well as their link there. You can also find Mara page here, and in the bottom of the comments, go through the links because I know you guys don't self-promote. Also, Grand Mafun. This is the moment I'm going to take real quick, everybody. This is a pioneer of neo-burlesque. Right here, Filipina, pioneer neo-burlesque. I know that you're very humble, but you literally went head to toe with Tita Vantes at Takeout with Lisa Ling, and you told her about exoticism, and she fucking listened and stopped doing her exoticism act, her Orientalism.
Well, okay, here's some burlesque tea on that if you guys want to get a little bit of burlesque tea.
Do we have time?
Do we have a little bit of time? A little bit of time. I was featured on Takeout with Lisa Ling, and I did get to publicly call out Dita Vantes discreetly, and have had the chance to get Lisa Ling, the journalist, to say "fuck you" for me. So that is amazing. Essentially, I called out a lot of the cultural appropriation that I saw on Burlesque, and you guys can watch it. It's on Max. It's been about 3 years now and features the first Filipinos that were in New Orleans. So the history of that as well. And they did a little feature on me. But yes, I did do Burlesque on it. There's a little tea. That was actually for Shanghai Pearl out in Seattle, who's an incredible Asian American burlesque dancer and also worked a lot with the Grant Avenue Follies. So anything about Asian American burlesque, hit me up. I've been there through the entire thing and I have worked with most of them. And yes, it is true. I've been a pioneer. I don't talk about it, but yeah, I've been here a while.
All right, y'all are amazing. This talk will be posted to our YouTube channel of the University Library. So if you look at library.osu.edu, and then, well, no, just look up Ohio State University Library YouTube. It will be there not this week, but next week. And we will also be sending the link to the video if you had to leave early or anything to everybody who registered. And so that'll have the slides, but you know where to look now if you need to find more information. Audience, you've been amazing. Thank you for this wonderful chat. Nina Couch, we do appreciate you. Thank you for being here. And thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you, Q and Brian, for monitoring links and chat. You, Beth, and thank you so much to our panelists and to Bellison. Thank you, everyone.